I'm Annie, the youngest in our family. Moving to a new house was meant to be exciting, a fresh start. But little did we know that our seemingly perfect home would become a nightmare of haunting and horror. When we moved into the old Victorian house on the outskirts of London, we were thrilled. It had character, history, and charm. The creaking floorboards and high ceilings gave it an air of mystery, but that only added to its allure. At first, life in the house was peaceful. The soft rustling of leaves outside our windows and the occasional hoot of an owl made it feel like a haven. Then, strange things began to happen. Objects shifted on their own, doors slammed shut without any breeze, and cold spots appeared out of nowhere. We laughed it off initially, blaming old pipes and drafty windows. But the laughter turned to unease as the activities escalated. Footsteps echoed through the halls at night, even though everyone was in their rooms. Whispers danced on the edges of our hearing, leaving us straining to understand. Objects would go missing, only to reappear in the most unexpected places. But the most unsettling were the shadows that seemed to move on their own, creeping along the walls and fading when we turned our heads. Our family dinners turned from joyous to tense. We avoided discussing the occurrences, fearing that acknowledging them would make them worse. The once warm house felt suffocating, like an unseen presence was watching our every move. One night, as I lay in bed, I heard the whispers again. This time, they were clearer, though the words made no sense. Fear prickled at my skin as a cold breeze swept through the room. I pulled the blankets tight, willing myself to ignore it. But then, a shadow moved across the wall, the silhouette of a figure that shouldn't have been there. I wanted to scream, to call for my parents, but my voice caught in my throat. The figure seemed to grow larger, looming over me. Its eyes glowed like fiery embers, fixated on me. I felt an icy grip around my chest, squeezing the breath out of me. "Annie," a voice hissed, a whisper that slithered into my mind. I couldn't move, couldn't escape. The figure's presence invaded my thoughts, sending visions of darkness and despair. Panic coursed through me, and I finally found my voice, letting out a scream that seemed to pierce the walls. My parents burst into the room, the lights flickering as they turned them on. The figure was gone, the room was empty, but the terror remained. I clung to my parents, sobbing and unable to explain what had happened. In the following days, the activity intensified. Objects flew across rooms, paintings fell from walls, and the whispers grew louder, more insistent. My family was at a loss, desperate to find an explanation. We sought the help of paranormal investigators, who brought equipment to detect any supernatural presence. The results were chilling: voices captured on recordings, strange energy fluctuations, and cold spots that defied explanation. As the days turned into weeks, my demeanor changed. I became distant, my gaze vacant. My family watched in horror as I seemed to lose myself, my personality fading. The investigators mentioned the possibility of possession, a word that sent shivers down our spines. One night, in a fit of desperation, my family held a séance. We gathered around a table, candles flickering, and tried to communicate with whatever was plaguing our home. The room grew cold, and I felt a strange sensation, as if something was trying to enter me, to take control. I fought against it, clinging to my family's voices, their love. But the darkness was persistent, wrapping around my thoughts and suffocating me. The candles flickered wildly, their flames dancing as if alive. And then, with a final surge of energy, the darkness retreated, leaving me gasping for air. The room fell silent, the weight of the possession lifting. Tears streamed down my face as I looked at my family, their faces filled with relief and fear. The house had become a battleground, a place of darkness and despair. We moved out shortly after, leaving behind the haunted Victorian house and the horror that had taken hold of us. Even now, I can't shake the memory of those glowing eyes and the feeling of being trapped in my own body. The supernatural is real, lurking in the shadows, and our family's brush with it will forever haunt our nightmares.
I'm Chris, a 19-year-old guy who loves a good scare, especially when it's just harmless spooky stories with my cousins. That night, we gathered at my house for a cousin's night over, a perfect opportunity to swap chilling tales and have some fun. But little did we know that our shared stories would become a haunting reality. With the moon hanging low and the wind rustling through the trees, the atmosphere was set for a night of frights. We sat in a circle in the dimly lit living room, the only light coming from the flickering candles placed strategically around the room. We laughed, shared jokes, and then it was time for the main event, the scary stories. Point one by one, we took turns weaving tales of haunted houses, vengeful spirits, and eerie encounters. The tension grew with each story, and nervous giggles filled the gaps between the chilling words. Our imaginations ran wild, and the shadows seemed to stretch longer, more sinister, as if the house itself was listening to our tales. As the night wore on, we decided to turn in, but the unsettling mood lingered. My cousins and I settled in different corners of the house, each claiming a spot for the night. I chose the couch in the living room, partially hidden by the shadows. Just as I was about to close my eyes, a strange sound echoed through the house, a soft, distant whisper that seemed to crawl along the edges of my consciousness. My heart raced as I sat up, straining to listen. Maybe it was just my imagination, the residual effect of the scary stories we'd shared, but then, I heard it again, the whisper, clearer this time, as if it was right beside me. My breath caught in my throat, and I turned on the small flashlight I kept nearby. Its feeble beam cut through the darkness, revealing nothing out of the ordinary. I told myself it was just the house settling, the wind playing tricks, but doubt gnawed at me. And then, a chill swept over the room, as if the temperature had suddenly dropped. I wrapped my arms around myself, the flashlight shaking in my hand. I heard footsteps, then, soft, hesitant footsteps, as if someone was moving through the house. Panic surged through me, and I whispered my cousin's name, hoping it was one of them playing a prank. But there was no response, only the echo of my voice in the silence. The footsteps grew louder, closer. I forced myself to stand, my legs shaky as I directed the flashlight towards the hallway. The beam illuminated a figure, a translucent form that stood at the end of the hall. It had a ghastly, hollow look, and its eyes were pools of darkness. My heart pounded in my chest as the figure started moving towards me, its footsteps echoing through the room. Fear gripped me, and I stumbled backward, my mind racing. I had heard of haunted houses and ghostly encounters, but I never thought I'd experience it firsthand. The figure was now just a few feet away, its presence sending shivers down my spine. I wanted to scream, to run, but I was rooted in place, my body frozen with terror. Its eyes seemed to pierce through me, and I could feel a coldness seeping into my bones, and then, with a sudden rush of courage, I turned and bolted towards the front door. Adrenaline surged through my veins, and I flung open the door, stumbling out into the night. Gasping for breath, I looked back at the house, half expecting the figure to follow me, but the house stood silent and still, the darkness within unyielding. My cousins rushed out behind me, their faces pale and filled with fear. None of us could explain what had happened, what we had seen. To this day, we don't talk about that night, those footsteps, or the ghastly figure. It remains a haunting memory, a reminder that the line between reality and the supernatural can be thin and fragile. The stories we shared came to life in ways we couldn't have imagined, forever changing our perception of the eerie and unknown.
I'm Alexa, and what happened that fateful night still sends shivers down my spine. It was a regular evening, but little did I know that a terrifying encounter awaited me in the heart of my own home. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I settled into my cozy living room, wrapped in a blanket and engrossed in a book. The wind rustled through the trees outside, creating an eerie symphony of creaks and whispers. The dim glow of the lamp cast dancing shadows on the walls, lending an air of comfort to the room, but as the night deepened, the atmosphere changed. A sense of unease settled over me, and the once familiar room seemed different, like an unfamiliar place I had stumbled upon. The shadows grew longer, darker, and the gentle rustling of leaves turned into a haunting whisper. I tried to brush off the feeling, attributing it to an overactive imagination. Maybe it was the book I was reading, or the way the wind played tricks on my senses. But then, a soft whisper, distinct and chilling, reached my ears. My heart skipped a beat, and I sat frozen, my senses on high alert. "Alexa," the voice murmured, its tone sending a shiver down my spine. I looked around, my eyes wide, but the room was empty. I felt a knot of fear tighten in my chest. The whisper had come from nowhere, from everywhere, as if it was carried by the very air itself. I tried to convince myself that it was a trick of my mind, a product of fatigue, but the unease remained. I stood up, my book falling forgotten to the floor. The lamp's glow seemed feeble against the growing darkness, and I suddenly felt very alone. Another whisper, louder this time, sent a jolt of terror through me. "Alexa, come closer." The voice was soft, gentle, but it was layered with an undercurrent of something dark and unsettling. I took a hesitant step forward, my heart racing. My logical mind told me to run, to flee from this inexplicable phenomenon, but curiosity held me in its grip. The whispers grew more insistent, filling the room like a suffocating fog. Shadows seemed to dance and writhe, taking on shapes that were not of this world. I could feel the weight of their gaze on me, as if I was being watched by unseen eyes. I moved towards the source of the whispers, the hallway leading to the bedrooms. The air grew colder, and I shivered, a chill coursing through me that had nothing to do with the temperature. The voice continued to beckon, and with each step, a sense of dread settled in the pit of my stomach. I reached my bedroom, the door slightly ajar. The room was bathed in darkness, broken only by slivers of moonlight that filtered through the curtains. The whispers seemed to come from within, swirling around me like a haunting melody. I pushed the door open, my breath catching as I stepped inside. The room was still, silent, but the presence was undeniable. And then, in the corner of my eye, I saw a figure, a translucent form that seemed to flicker in and out of existence. It was the outline of a person, a woman, her features ethereal and insubstantial. My heart pounded in my chest as I stared at the figure, my mind reeling. Fear and fascination warred within me, and I could feel a strange energy in the air, as if the room itself was charged with something otherworldly. "Alexa," the figure spoke, its voice a mere echo, yet it seemed to reverberate through the room. I couldn't tear my gaze away, even as the figure drifted closer, its movements fluid and unnatural. The whispers intensified, and I felt as though I was drowning in a sea of voices, each one trying to reach me, to tell me something. And then, as abruptly as it had started, it stopped. The room was silent once more, the figure gone. I stood alone in the darkness, my heart still racing, my mind grappling with what had just occurred. I left the room, the weight of the encounter heavy on my shoulders. I didn't sleep that night, the echoes of the whispers haunting my thoughts. The following days were filled with unease, a constant feeling that I was being watched, that I had glimpsed something beyond our world. To this day, I can't explain what I encountered that night. Was it a ghost, a figment of my imagination, or something else entirely? The whispers linger in my memory, A chilling reminder that the line between reality and the unknown can blur in the most unsettling way.